Hello, testing, testing, one, two, three. We're just doing a quick sound check, so to make sure you guys can hear us all right before we get things underway. First off, can you hear me? So we'll start with that, and then I'll have Sagog chime in. Judging by the XD face, I'm going to take that as a yes. Audio's good.
This is a sound test. 1 1 1 2 1.
How does Sagog sound for you guys? Hopefully not too loud, but not too quiet. We're trying to get the Goldilocks level here. Clear, not as loud. Can in fact hear higher up for Gogme. That's easily. I can use the slider here just to boop it up a little
Do you
bit.
want to do that, or do you want me to change my volume up?
No, I can do it easily enough in OBS. Should be fine. But hopefully that sounds a little bit better.
Do you want me to repeat the limit test with?
No, I think I think it'd be all right.
Or not?
No, I think we're good. Okay, just a few last minute tweaks, and then we shall begin. Hello! Hope you guys can hear me all right. I assume we're coming in live. Greetings to everyone. Hope you're all doing well. But yeah, my name is Safarian. I usually stream on Twitch myself, but I'm also working as a QA for the Dark West, and I'm currently joined by Sagog. So say hello. Make sure sound's coming through.
How you doing, Safarian?
I am doing well, thank you very much. But I appreciate you guys with your patience there. It was kind of like just wanted to make sure that all the settings were correct. Ran into a couple of technical difficulties, so I want to thank everyone for their patience. Brandon, appreciate the assist as it was a bit of a slapdash at the last second, but we got it working in the end. Especially Blaze as well. Thank you. He had to literally guide me step by step just to make sure I was getting the webcam capture correct. Definitely had a smooth brain moment on my part, but we got there in the end. So yeah, I hope everyone's doing well. So to kind of get the ball rolling, I guess you probably want to know more about both myself and Sagog. So I figured a great place to start as any, given that we're on the subject of ARPGs. I wanted to pose a question to Gog first. Like, what is your own history been with like ARPGs? Where did you like first begin? Like, what was your inception moment?
Yeah, so it would have been probably 1998, 16-year-old me on the school laptop with Diablo 1. I feel like that was the start. And then it was Diablo 2 that really won me over to ARPGs originally. Diablo 1 was a great game, but it also doesn't have quite the replayability that D2 does. And so I was really hyped for Diablo 3. And then the business model came out and it was going to be all heavily based around a sort of pay to cheat auction house setup originally.
Right.
And my excitement for Diablo 3 went from here right down to here in an instant. And then I heard about this competitor game that was being sort of brewed somewhere called Path of Exile. And when that came out, I was like, oh, let's give that a shot. And then I sort of became a little bit hooked, and a little bit hooked became a lot hooked. And then eventually I ended up getting just kind of actually by chance into content creation in Path of Exile. And then, yeah, basically that's the majority of my background. I've dabbled in Path of Exile 2. I've dabbled even less in Last Epoch. Had a bunch of fun with both games, but PoE 1 has definitely become a major thing since. And then there's always a few things that kind of irk you in these games, and that was something that when I was reached out to by Lighty on this project, I was like, oh, let's see what we can do.
Right. So mine. So I suspect that Diablo 2 is going to be pretty prominent because that seems to be the case for many. I'm very much an outlier here. So technically the first ARPG I ever played. It was actually Baldur's Gate, not the isometric RPG. This was on the GameCube, and another one was called Champions of Norath. Now, these were both console based, so there were a very limited number of classes and builds, and the item pool was limited, and there wasn't really much of an end game. There was more of a go through the campaign, kill some of the major bosses, and then generally you'd go from like normal to like higher level difficulty. So it was kind of like that. But technically, the first ARPG I played was Diablo 3. Now, my perspective on that game, I was very neutral because I didn't really have anything coloring my opinion. But what got me into it was at the time I was playing World of Warcraft, and it was right about Cataclysm. And the group I played with, all I kept hearing is Diablo 3. Oh, you gotta play Diablo 3. Have you heard of Diablo 3? Are you gonna play Diablo 3? And I thought, well, if you guys are gonna play it, sure. And coincidentally, Blizzard had an option where if you paid a year's worth of subscription, they just threw D3 into the mix. So I thought, I'm probably gonna play the game World of Warcraft for a year. Why not? So I gave it a try, and I think I played it for a couple of months. I had a blast. I played with my friends. They enjoyed it. But like I said, I didn't have any preconceived notions of any previous ARPG. Certainly not Diablo 2. And I realized that my friend group that I was playing with, for them, it didn't resonate as strongly. Something about D3 just didn't capture the same way that D2 had captured them. And then sometime later, that's when I started hearing about Path of Exile. And they kind of started to describe the game to me. And I thought, well, I've already played Diablo 3. Why not give Path of Exile a look? And the first thing that was striking to me, it's going to be vain, this. But I was first shown a screenshot of the gem system, the way the gem supports were linked. And I was like, that's like Final Fantasy VII's like materia system, gave me like very, very similar vibes. And then I saw the skill tree, which calling it a tree is an insult, it's a forest. But when I saw that, once again, being a big Final Fantasy nerd, it reminded me of Final Fantasy X sphere grid system. So I was like, what's going on here? So I decided to play the game. And for me, the light bulb moment was playing as the witch and like casting the fireball with like lesser multiple kind of projectiles and seeing that. And then I thought, oh, wow. Okay, so what class you pick depends on where you are on the tree. And if I wanted to, I could, while it might not be the most ideal thing, I could take the witch down the melee route and kind of just build the character however I want. And this sort of compounded over time where I was playing the game a little, then a lot, then maybe too much. And then over time, when I got into streaming, PoE became generally my flagship game because it was consistently being updated. It was always shaking up the meta and it just kept bringing me back over and over. Now, I have by extension eventually dabbled in, obviously, PoE 2. I've played Grim Dawn. I've also messed around with Last Epoch. And many people will be surprised, only just recently played Diablo 2 for the first time. I played Resurrected, and I decided not to do the new class because I wanted to play one of the original ones, so I had as close to an original experience. Granted, I got the upscaled, the improved graphics, and probably a lot of quality of life that you guys didn't have when you played it in its heyday. And I gotta say, for a game that came out, a couple of decades back, I still had a lot of fun. I had an absolute blast playing as a necromancer. I had a whole menagerie of minions. The AI was a little frustrating at times because I often had to like compel them to join me, but overall I was able to make my own scuff to build and somehow managed to get to hell difficulty before, well, let's just say I hit a brick wall eventually, but that was kind of like my history overall. But yeah, that's kind of where I ended up. Yeah, welcome to everyone. I'm seeing a lot of folks coming in. Usually I'd be like, hey Major, hey Hex, hey Blaze, hey Ash. But yeah, hope everyone's doing well. So following on from that, so this is funny. I was just talking to Sigok off stream, and I have not had a one-on-one conversation with him once. It's generally been in Discord, right? From the way he spoke and his like knowledge pool, I assumed he'd been on the project from the very beginning. And it turns out he's like, oh, I've only been here for a little while. I was like, what? So I was just about to ask, this kind of leads into the next question I really wanted to ask him is, how did you originally get approached when it came to coming onto the Dark West project? Like, how did it begin? Like, how'd you end up here, I guess is the question.
So Lighty is one of the central figures behind the Dark West, and really he's the direct boss for most of us that are working on it. And he just reached out to me, and it was because we'd talked before, like we talked about Path of Exile related stuff in the past. So we already had that degree of rapport. And he said that he was working on an ARPG and was interested in potentially having someone that was a bit of a maths nerd. Because, like in our internal staff Discord, I've just named myself Sergog Maths Nerd / numbers or something like that. And so he was like, yeah, he wanted to get the progression systems in a state where, like, you're not going to get them perfect on the first shot, but you want to get them to a point where like your character is getting more powerful, but this is roughly at the same speed the monsters are getting more powerful, so that you don't feel like either the monsters are getting way too powerful too quickly and you're just getting overwhelmed.
Yeah.
And you also want to have a robust system that feels good to level 30 for the early access release. Not that 30 is a cap. You can go beyond that, but we expect a lot of players will probably play to about 30, double a bit with the end game. If they love the initial end game, then maybe they can go further. You can get to level 50 definitely in the end game that'll exist in early access. But you can also have a system that doesn't need to be reworked when you go to level 100.
Mm-hmm.
And that was one of the goals that I had, was trying to find ways to do that don't just fall apart later. And so just because I've got that maths background, like International Maths Olympiad in the 90s and then uni maths and the like, that meant that there's a whole bunch of stuff that is just sort of already there that you can sort of draw from and get things in a position where you've theory crafted them to the point you think they should feel about right. But then, of course, playtesting trumps the mathematics.
Right, I'm starting to see why folks started to use the term when numbers came, gogifying it. So I'm starting to see that's very much leaning into your background. I didn't realize it was so extensive. But yeah, I was genuinely surprised. Just like literally learned minutes before the stream. I just automatically assumed with like how just the overall knowledge of like at least from the numbers perspective, I thought he must have been here since the beginning of the project. But yeah, Sagog just like casually said, "Oh yeah, just recently joined." So I was like, "The hell have I been doing this whole time?" But yeah, in my case, my story is a little more funny. Brandon, gotta put you a little bit on the spot here, pal. But I ain't gonna lie, this was freaking funny. How this started off. So this was back in. I can already see him going, not like this. So this was. I got the date, by the way, young man. It was the 10th of June. So I was just doing a regular stream. I'm assuming I was playing Path of Exile. And let's just say Brandon was a little bit forward with the pitch of the game. So you know how Twitch has it where if someone posts a message for the first time, we have it in fact in this stream right now where it says first message. In not so many words, Brandon said, "Oh yeah, we're working on a new RPG. Sorry, an ARPG, and it's currently on Steam. Do you want to give it a gander?" I ain't gonna lie. Some of my chat was like, "Oh, it's a bot," whereas other members were like, "Oh, look at this rabble rouser coming in doing a self promote." So I was like, before things kind of go off the rail, I was like, you know what? I'm gonna check it out just because I can. Because he mentioned it was on Steam, so I figured, if you're comfortable, could I share it? And Brandon was like, yeah, go nuts. So I opened up Steam, and I believe this particular trailer is no longer available. Yeah, Ash is one of my mods, by the way, and she had the hammer ready as well, which is hilarious. But I ended up watching a very, very like a pre-alpha trailer, like very, 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 very early, and I gave it a watch, and obviously I could tell it's super early days, but the vibe I got. Has anyone seen the original Path of Exile trailer like 14 years ago? Like the really early one. I got very similar vibes with that. I was like, I can see what they're going for here. It's also in like a Western setting, which to be honest, I hadn't seen any ARPG, at least to my knowledge, really delve into that. So I gave it a watch and I gave my honest opinion. And I said, you know what? If you guys are working on a new ARPG and you want to step into that arena, go nuts. Like I'm all for it. I'll put it on my wish list, and I encouraged my viewers to do that. And it was eventually I PM'd Brandon my email, and he kind of forwarded a bit more details and said, "Oh, we'll reach out in like Discord." And then he, by extension, put me into contact with Hex. our fearless leader, no doubt. And I was speaking, or Kevin, as I generally call him, and there was a bit of back and forth. And we had a few like tentative conversations, and he gave me like a rough idea. And the game was still like very, 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 very early days, and we had a few like sporadic conversations, and I was already taking notes because I was already like somewhat invested. I was like, I'm curious to see what this game's overall progression is going to be in its development. So I had a little notepad and I just jotted things down. And I remember Kevin was giving me like rough dates and what the timeline was looking like. And after a couple of conversations between mid last year towards the end, we started talking a little more regularly because I know there were some like technical hurdles that were very challenging to overcome. And I actually got, despite not officially being on the team, I did get to see some stuff which I think like your average Joe wouldn't be privy to. And I thought, damn, this has come like a really long way. Because if that early trailer that was on the Steam page, like way back when, and this is where we're at now, that's pretty damn fast. So eventually, as I was having a conversation with Kevin, it kind of went 0 to 100, like from my perspective. So we were just kind of talking about the mechanics and like the faction system, and he even shared some of the concept art for some of the tarot cards. I was like, damn, these are a vibe, man. I'm digging these. And then all of a sudden, Kevin, you might have to correct me on this, but it kind of went from, you should just join the QA, man. Like just casually threw it out there. And me, I well, if anyone knows me well enough, I have the lowest opinion of myself. So my instant response was, what on God's green earth could I possibly bring to this group? Because when names were mentioned, like we got Major Aimless, right? Yeah, we got Wooly, right? We got Sigog. We got like some heavy hitters. And I'm just a schmuck who, has a decent amount of time in playing the ARPG genre. And I wasn't sure what I could bring to it. So I was very candid. Like, here's Kevin extending an opportunity, and I'm negotiating myself out of it. That's my default setting because I'm an idiot. So I was very candid with what I thought I could bring and what I couldn't. And Kevin was like, "No pressure. Like, just chill." And once you're on the QA, take a look at what's in the Discord. Kind of get a feel of what you think that just get an idea of where we're up to and where you feel like you might be able to contribute. And from there, I kind of started to look at. The first thing I latched onto was like the lore, and then I started to look at obviously the earlier version of the game, and then kind of that's how we ended up here. So I went from getting reached out for Brandon to then being passed over to Kevin, and then suddenly being extended the opportunity to join in QA, and I'm here broadcasting. Hello. But yeah, that's me in a nutshell.
Yeah, I've got to say the stuff about the lore was fascinating. It's something where, being Australian, we just don't really talk that much about the American Wild West. Like, it's something existed, but you don't know very much about. And then just sort of researching some of the things that we had as the lore of the game, and it was like, this is really cool.
Well,
it's like it's a mythology I knew very little about, and that, just sort of looking into things and how it's sort of a lower magic system, a lower magic world than most places, some grounding in reality, but it's definitely also going to have fantastical elements. That was something that really definitely got my attention.
Yeah, because the part that blew me away was so when I wanted to get started in QA, for me, the part I wanted to latch onto is I felt like if I was going to make any kind of suggestion, whether it was gameplay mechanic, item design, anything like that, I needed to know what the world setting was because I didn't want to suddenly be like, let's stick in AK-47, mate. Like that wouldn't really make sense given the time frame that we reside in. So I asked like you got any lore? Boy, let me tell you, your boy's got lore for days. There was a 50-odd page document which went into exhaustive detail. So I started by first reading that, and there was also a separate document which covered basically like the timeline and basically what is like the dark deities in the game. I won't go into too much detail because spoilers. As well as like the factions, when it came like architecture in terms of like the design of buildings. It was just like tab after tab of details, and I thought, okay, someone's really done their like legwork in terms of researching this game. So the lore was very much the first thing I became rather obsessed with, and I even started like kind of bouncing off some ideas with Lighty as well, which he was kind enough to update. So for me, it was definitely the Western setting that had it set itself apart from many of the other ARPGs that I've played. Because like residing in the UK, there ain't much Wild West. Plenty of stabbing in London, but not much in terms of Wild West elements. But yeah, that's kind of like the first place that I kind of dug my heels in. But yeah, that's kind of where we're at now. Obviously, we're still waiting for questions to come in, which we'll get to them in due course. Just bear with me. Also, kind of giving you an idea of like where me and Sigog kind of found our footing here. So,
Public in chat is asking like what the lore is about. I feel like a fair bit of that should probably be kept secret for your first playthrough. Like I think there's, like what we loosely say that this is sort of imagine a fictional town loosely based on 1860s Arizona, but then you definitely have strong supernatural elements that are in the background. They're not moving and shaking the world the way that, say, supernatural elements do in Path of Exile's world or in World of Warcraft's world, but they're there and they're sort of very much, I feel, more Darkest Dungeon inspired than being sort of sorcerers blasting fire magic everywhere.
Yeah, we'll be heavy on like occult elements, and I'd say like folklore are the type of things that we're going to be like leaning into. It was only recently the community had submitted a mix of things. Like there was a video that I think Lighty kind of tested this, or those who were present. We watched basically a compilation of like 100 different types of cryptids, and some that we could like potentially take influence from. I will say a lot of them had this weird pervasive theme of having glowing eyes and eating livestock. However, there were a couple of zingers there, and Lighty took some extensive notes. And yeah, we are generally pulling from elements from like the real world, even though cryptids. But yeah, the occult elements are also going to be very heavy. So the game, I will say, having recently played Diablo 2 as well, we are starting to like the general vibe. It is going to be very dark. It's called the Dark West, literally, but it's also going to be very gritty, and we're not going to shy away from certain elements. So we want to kind of evoke that image that it's a harsh world on the frontier. Is generally what we're going with. Yeah, exactly. Like write that down. Write that down. But yeah, the question I wanted to ask you, Sigog, was what was the initial thing that interested you like about the project? I know you said that you were approached by Lighty, but like what was the kind of like was there like a sales pitch you were given, or what was the thing that kind of like reeled you in right off the rip?
So I think there's a few things. There's firstly, there is a bit of self-interest. Like if you're involved in content creation, you have this thing where in Path of Exile and Path of Exile 2, it's like 1 month busy, 1 month quiet. And during that quiet month, it's it can be a mess to get by sometimes. But also, so there is that element, of course. But then there's also the fact that there's just so much interesting stuff about a world I just don't know very much about. The whole Wild West type atmosphere. And also just the thought of, oh, look, there's a whole lot of things that I feel RPGs have just started treating as almost sacred cows, where it's like one game title to the next. This system's done almost the same way. And some of those, I think, they're good decisions that have been made, but some of them I think are more questionable. And I think like things like being able to design systems that can break some of the limits on scaling that have been long established in the genre is something that really sort of sung to me.
Cool. Yeah. I mean, for me, I think it was mainly speaking to Kevin. It was the early conversations that we had. So I think it was probably the second conversation. When I learned about like the setting, I think the part that I was initially hooked is when he was describing the two factions where we have the Order and the Damned. And it was clear like the story and the narrative was going to be, it wasn't going to be necessarily hand waved. It was going to be, it was going to be much more front and center. So when he was describing kind of how these two factions worked, that was like the initial hook. And more than anything, I could tell like he himself is an ARPG player, so I could tell like he was practically just eager to almost like gushing about what the game was at that point where it was at, and as like, he was very candid. That was the key thing. Like, in terms of like what his view was, and like the type of game that he was hoping to make, and what kind of got him to push for making a game like this. Especially when we started to share the very, very early like concept art and other elements. That to me was like the initial pull. And obviously, once I was brought into QA in its entirety, and then I had access like to Discord and everything else, then I ain't gonna lie, that was a little intense, because I thought, there's probably going to be a couple of channels and there'll be a couple of little doohickeys here and there. Nah, it freaking ain't. There's literally like design sections, and there's like threads upon threads upon threads, and it's terrifying the talented number of people that are working here, because I'm seeing everything from the programming aspect, which by the way goes completely over my head, but seeing something like from a very early concept art to its finalized form, especially when it comes to, like, say, the tarot cards, for example, it's insane. Like the absolute, like the overall progression over time. Same thing with like character animations or like ability effects, like as it's been iterated upon. Even the models of like certain enemies as well, where it's gone from early stage to where we are now. I quickly realized, why am I going to fit in here? Because these guys are all titans, and I'm just a random schmuck. But I was consistently just impressed with what I just kept seeing in each of the channels. It's been pretty mind blowing. Also, did I see someone asking if Will Smith is going to be in the game? I think that's very unlikely. It's very unlikely, unless we do a little. So yeah, Sil Wimith, as Blaze put it, would be pretty accurate.
Yeah, that's going to be a copyright issue, unfortunately.
Yeah,
that's like one of those things where it'd be really funny, but you're not going to get the rights to have his name.
Wooly, say never, say never. Listen, you want to get into touch with their lawyers? I'll let you spearhead that, Wooly. That's all you, buddy. But yeah. So the other thing I was gonna go into is, so since having like joined the project, what's like the main thing that you've been finding yourself kind of contributing and adding to? Like, what's I guess, like, what's your area of expertise? Because obviously it's definitely the numbers, but could you be a bit more like specific, as like, or an example or something you can give?
Yeah, all right. I'll give a couple of examples. One of the things that I've noticed from Path of Exile in particular, but this also applies to other ARPGs in general. Those of you that are Path of Exile players in the chat here, I assume it's probably a fair number of you. How many of you feel you thoroughly understand all the nuances of the experience point system in Path of Exile 1? This is me asking a question of chat, because it'll influence further talking on this.
All right. Okay. All right. It's either yes
so
or
people
no.
are either saying no, or they're commenting that anyone that says yes is a liar.
Yeah.
And the reason for that is a very early design decision that Path of Exile made, and that was that they kept, for those of you that are maths or IT nerds, it's a 32-bit integer as your character's XP. For those of you that aren't, computers consider numbers under about 4.3 billion a little bit easier to represent than numbers that are larger than 4.3 billion. And so a very early design decision was made. We're capping XP at 4.3 billion. But that didn't play very well, and they wanted to have progression it didn't play smoothly. So they had in all these really complicated diminishing returns formulas in order to make it so that you're sort of forcing 4.3 billion to work. Well, our approach is just going to be, we are not having a 4.3 billion cap. We're going to let player XP get into the quadrillions and the quintillions. And by doing that, we get the ability to make it a very simple system. Whenever you kill a level 30 monster, you get the same amount of XP, whether you're level 15 and you somehow manage to kill something way past your level, or whether you're level 81 and you kill something that's trivial at your level. And what this allows us to do is get rid of a lot of the complexity, although at the expense of having larger numbers. And like the processing cost of that is trivial, because it's just something like setting it as a 32-bit integer is something it was not done as a performance improving decision. It was done as a simplicity decision, and it's come back to bite them later by making things much more complex. So that's one of the less significant things, but I think something that'll be really simple. And we also set it so that going from level 0 to 50 requires the same amount of XP as going from 53 to 54. and that'll be the case. I'm just using 50 as an example there, but that's the case always. So going from level 0 to level X is going to be the same XP as going from X plus 3 to X plus 4. And that is an exponential curve. The very first thing I did was modeling that system to get it so that it's something that the same rules apply everywhere.
Like you said, gogging out. Told you he's our numbers guy. But no, yeah, I mean, it's not the first time that Gog explained this to me, and I gotta say, I think we found the right man for the job, at least when it comes to anything to do with the numbers. Yeah, one of my viewers, Sage, he's also his domain is very much math as well. I figured you would approve of that one. So,
whoever it is that's in the maths, this was generating functions. So this was working out the various like recursions that was sort of Fibonacci-esque, looking for one that had an XP curve that was as satisfying feeling exponential, and that's where the I think it's x to the 4 plus x to the 3 plus 1 equals 0. Oh, sorry, minus 1 equals 0. That's not quite right. X to the 4 minus x to the 3 minus 1 equals 0. I think was the one that had the best curve.
I guarantee you, the one person that will probably understand this is going to be Sage. He's maths is definitely his area of expertise.
That is university level maths. Like it's you don't need to understand it to follow the implementation. That's how the curve was designed. Yeah. But the key thing is just that simple recurrence. 0 to 50 is the same amount of XP as 53 to 54.
I mean,
that's the simple part of it. Yeah. The actual complexity of how we picked that one, and not 0 to 50 is the same as 54 to 55. That was just based on the complex maths.
I mean, much like Sage, I mean, he hit Fibonacci and understood. I hit Fibonacci and I think of the Joker in Balatro. That's the first thing that jumped into my head. But yeah, with regards to me, I mean, I unfortunately cannot pull from such a large world of experience. But in terms of like what I've been, to the best of my ability, be able to bring to this, I play a lot of ARPGs. That's I think a lot of us have here. I think somewhere in the ballpark of maybe 30,000 hours. And before any of you say rookie numbers, don't make me throttle you with my controller cord, all right? As far as I'm concerned, that's a decent amount of time. But I can certainly pull from my own personal experience having played those ARPGs. So we're talking like PB1 and 2. We've got Grim Dawn, Silence Brandon. We got Last Epoch, Diablo 2. So having played those, I think is generally I can speak from my own experience of what I found things, which game mechanics I enjoyed, elements that have to that overlap with like item design. More than anything, I'm a big D&D nerd. And for me, I have an exceptionally strong affinity when it comes to world building and lore, which is probably the reason one of the first things I latched onto when I joined the project was the lore. And boy, was I glad that Lighty had been so extensive with setting up everything like the Dark Deities and setting up a general timeline of how, the events of the game began at the very, very early stages to where we are now. I think it was probably the first one that kept poking and prodding him. So how did this happen? Yeah, but what about this big chasm between point A and B? How do you explain that? So hopefully I wasn't driving him too crazy, because I'm someone who likes to have an answer to the question. I'm not saying everything has to be solved for the lore. Like, it's okay to have some things left a little ambiguous or open to interpretation. Like, for example, take something like Dark Souls and Elden Ring. Like, it has a story, although some are infuriated with how it is articulated to the player. But there is one that you can follow, whether it's through observation, whether it's through NPC dialogue, or whether it's through item description. And you can eventually like connect the dots. But I'm someone who just likes to have everything just neatly explained. But I think there is a middle ground to be had when it comes to storytelling, where not everything needs to have a complete explanation from point A to B. But one thing, and it's the only thing that I can actually say wholeheartedly that I can be, dare I say, somewhat of an authority figure, is when the time does come when the Dark Quest is going to focus on its controller support. That me right there, I got that covered in spades, baby. You want controller? This right here is the Alpha und Omega. So yeah, I'll be able to contribute on that. But yeah, that's the one place that I can actually take a modicum of pride in. So I can assure you that I'll do my utmost to offer as much information as I can. But yeah. By the way, in case you see this, This is me going into the questions document in case we have anything coming in, so I'll be refreshing it. So apparently we had one here. Is the Dark Quest going to have controller support and work with the Steam Deck? I can't speak to the Steam Deck, so we'll need to have someone from well, Hex, you have to chime in here. But we do have plans for controller support. Right now, though, we're currently working towards releasing the game's demo, and eventually there'll be early access, and then we'll have like the full release. So it's something which is being considered. There's something this I might come to discussing this later, but I have put together around about a 12-page document or so that basically covers the broad strokes of other ARPGs that I've played and sort of kind of listing the do's and don'ts of what I felt was like good design for controllers and some that might not have like kind of missed the mark. So I hope that we'll pull from that. And the intent is to just have both a UI that's consistent and something that just makes sense. And fortunately, there's plenty of ARPGs on the market that there are a lot of crossovers and similarities between these games, but each one has done a few things differently. And I've listed like the merits to that as well as the downsides as well. Generally, the hope is that we pull from other ARPGs and just take the best of all worlds and create something which, for the most part, is going to be all the positives and work out as many of the negatives. But yeah, that's kind of where we're at. So another question for you, Sir Gog. So I know, having learned only recently that you've joined the team in over the past like couple of weeks or so in change. What's like the
couple months?
Couple months, yeah. Sorry. So what's the biggest thing that you feel like you're most proud of that you've been able to like contribute that you thought that's what I'm talking about, like that you've been proud of?
I reckon it's some of the fundamental combat maths that come up here are the things that I think are probably the most important overall. One thing that people will be very familiar with if you've played in ARPGs in the past is that at some point, player critical hit mitigation becomes really, really critical.
Yeah.
Pun actually not intended there, which is unusual for me. Normally, if I make a pun, it's very deliberate, but this one was not an intended pun. And so one of the things that I wanted to do was find a system where critical hit mitigation scales as you're playing the game, but crits always matter. And so we've ended up with a system where we have a critical resistance stat that players get, but this is something that is going to keep scaling, and monsters' critical multiplier, I guess for lack of a better word, will also keep scaling. We've just fundamentally reworked how critical hits work so that if you deal an attack and it would normally deal 100 fire damage, but it happens to be a critical, you might deal 100 fire plus 350 critical damage. And then that critical damage is something that whatever target you're hitting is mitigated by a separate resistance to fire resistance. And so that's something that then means that critical hits remain relevant. We're going to get the numbers on this. I think this is one that we've really got to play test well. It's not something I feel like my initial handoff is going to be perfect on, but that we want to get it to a point where critical hits always can be done by both players and monsters, but it's not just game over because the wrong monster crits you at the wrong time.
As I can imagine, that's probably going to, as you mentioned, need adjusting over time. I guess that's going to be for us QA folk to work at. Yeah, because
I feel like what I've handed over is like it's not good enough even for early access yet because it needs to be tested.
Right.
And that's part of the thing. Like you have your internal QA before early access, so that the worst mistakes we make can get caught before the public has to see them.
Yeah, I mean, there's also the other thing where when you have your in-house QA, while we can give feedback immediately, being so close to the project, we can end up having kind of like blind spots. So when the time does come where it's opened, by and large, they're going to catch things like, because we're both ARPG players, we've got an obscene amount of time in the genre. We're also very close to the project. It's very easy to look at things and think it's like very self-evident or just something that does not enter our field of view. So I'm sure as once the game is in the hands or on a broader set of hands and fresh set of eyes, I'm pretty sure they'll probably pick up on some things which we didn't consider. But
and there's going to be things that you will know that getting, say, 90 curse resistance on an item, it's not an unbelievably high amount the way that it would be in most other ARPGs. But I feel like a lot of ARPG players will look at certain items that we've got and think, oh, wow, well, that thing is crazy. But that's because our resistances work differently to what people are used to. One of those sacred cows that I think is like it was a really good system in the 1990s, and it's become really standard in the ARPG world. But I think we can do better.
so, Swab, you mentioned once it's out early access allows you to break the game. I mean, I feel like players in general, that's kind of like what we want, right? Once the game is out, we want players to see what they can throw at it, to see what they can break. Obviously, if anything is fundamentally broken, we're going to want to tone that down. But the intent is that's sort of what you want players to do. You want them to go kind of crazy with what's available within reason. But yeah, that's kind of like the go to. So
You want to try and make it so that you break the game in ways that are fun.
yeah,
But if there are ways to make the game that are just not fun, like if they just, oh, okay, here's this build that once you've got it set up, there's just no engaging content left at all. That's something that we don't want people getting to that point quickly,
Yeah.
because then they're just going to get bored.
Yeah.
And then at that point, well, that's a problem unless you feel like they've actually completely experienced everything in the game.
Yeah.
And then at that point, that's fine to just get to the point that there's no challenges left because you've overcome them all and you've just won.
So yeah, as Brandon put it, that's like the fun is kind of like the main thing they're after. I mean, as for myself, in terms of like what I've been able to contribute myself, I sort of hinted at one of the earlier things. So I tend to contribute or work when my schedule allows, which can be a little bit tricky. Also, time zone wise, I had a bit of a disadvantage because usually by the time I'm actually able to join for like QA meetings, it's kind of midnight-ish, and usually after I've streamed, and anyone knows the phrase I use, I'm sharp as a cue ball and bright as an eclipse. So I'm already at a significant debuff joining in on these conversations. Thankfully, everyone else is very chill and very, very welcoming, despite me not exactly operating at maximum efficiency. But I will say, for me, the part, like my own experiences that I've managed to take part in, like the QA meetings, the things I enjoy the most. We've done everything from like designing new items. That was cool. Before anyone says it, Bramblejack may or may not be in this game. Who knows? Could be. But also like refining game mechanics. So we've discussed several, and it's usually we all sort of contribute. Some things get thrown out. Usually a bit of back and forth, and usually there's some sort of like a compromise. And occasionally we'll get a suggestion that from someone that no one else considered. That's the part I love, because the document is literally like being updated live by Lighty as we're discussing these mechanics. I'd love to go into more detail, but then we're entering spoiler territory, so unfortunately I can't speak to those. But I would say the biggest thing that I'm most happy that I was able to contribute, obviously it will not come into play as much until later, was the controller document. I'm looking to make it into video form as well, because there are some examples, while in written form, make perfect sense. I think I'll be able to drive the point more home if it's done in video format. But for me, one moment that stood out was I got to be careful with my words because I don't want to say what the thing is. But for now, I'll say there was a mechanic that we were working on, and it went through kind of like different iterations, and we made like modifications. And then came this moment where I thought, that's a cool mechanic. I'll have fun playing that. But Lighty, I got a question. How does this actually fit within the, like, from a lore standpoint in the Dark West? So the question I asked was, how does the mechanic like fit? Like, how does it come into like existence? Why is the mechanic like looping? What is compelling the player from a story and narrative standpoint to interact with this mechanic? And Lighty's response was, Seth, those are great questions. Which was my cue to go back to the lore document. So what I ended up doing was I kind of wrote those questions out and I asked myself, okay, we'll have to do a little bit of like retroactiveness here. So I looked at everything we had, like the dark deities, the locations, the settings. Once again, picking my words carefully because I don't want to say something that I shouldn't. But eventually, I was able to answer all those questions with the lore document that was available. Now, what was funny was I just assumed Light was going to be like, Seth, those are good suggestions. I'll get back to you. He kind of just sort of added it and more or less made it canon, which I ain't gonna lie, it did make me feel pretty good because that was like an instance where I thought, hey, I did a thing. Me, this guy. So it was a lot of fun, sort of looking at a mechanic that everyone had worked on together, offered a lot of feedback, and there was this like moment where I thought, wow, this is cool. We also ideally, while I don't know how many players will actually um, go into great length about asking, well, why is this thing here? Why does it work the way it does? How does it fit in the world? I figured it was probably just good practice to make sure that it fits with the lore and narrative that we already have established. And thankfully, we're able to kind of get ahead of that. Because what I didn't want was that we finished doing the mechanic and then somewhere way down the line, way down the line, when we're fleshing out the story, there's this moment where we're like, oh shit, how do we explain this mechanic now? So I didn't want that to happen further down the line. So just being a little prudent in that regard. Yes, Fab. Seth does occasionally do things. I have my moments. They're very few, much like the brain cells in my head, but I have my moments.
Spellworks has got an interesting question in chat there, which is unique items. Will they be build enablings or just power ups? And we're terming, I think the thing that you're thinking of as being unique items would be our masterworks. They're playing the same sort of role. And I think you'll find that there is a bit of both in the sense that some of them are just very raw powerful, but some of them are very, I think, gameplay transforming is more the way that I would put it for a lot of them. I don't think we wanted to spoil any of the specific masterworks yet, mostly because things are changing a bit. But something else that we've done that I think you might find really interesting there, Spablex, is that some of the base item types are more build enabling than just power ups as well. And so if you're a Path of Exile 1 player, you'll be familiar with how you have a fair bit of variety in what you might choose to put on your belt implicit. And we're talking about earlier in the game because it's sort of solved at endgame. So you're like, okay, I need strength because my character needs that to function. Or maybe I can go for some life on my belt implicit. Or maybe I'll use a crystal belt and get a whole chunk of ES. Or maybe a rustic sash or whatever. However, those are just power-ups and you get to choose between a bunch of them. We've decided to go a little bit wilder in 1 or 2 slots. So if you were to look at your helmets are going to just give you curse resistance and critical hit chance as implicits by default. And the better the helmet base type, the more of each stat you're going to get. And then there's other spots that will give you physical resistance, which is going to help provide your physical mitigation that you associate with armor. But if you have a look at the trinket slot, we've got some interesting ones there. I think you might find that that you can have a rare item that ends up being very build defining as well.
Yeah, on the subject of Masterworks, I think one of the most fun QA moments was like brainstorming some of these because we went from first kind of trying to keep the designs grounded until eventually, I think was it Wooly? It's like, fuck this. Let's just go buck wild. Let's see what we can come up with. So some of the stuff is really out there. I ain't gonna lie, some of it got shot down, which it feels bad moment. But some of the things that from us talking about it to then seeing iterated upon and then having the artwork for it, I gotta say it was pretty damn good because you could be like, we contributed to that. But big props to the artist as well because some of the stuff is looking pretty darn good. And I tell you, there's so many ones that I'd like to just shout out because like one of my favorite uniques, what I've dubbed the unique of uniques in like Path of Exile, one of my favorite to this day will probably be Facebreaker. Absolutely love that because that like drastically changes how you play. So my hope is that folks will have a very similar feel with some of the equipment that we're gonna have on display because some of it's very out there. So I'm very excited to get this when the time comes when you guys get to mess around with it yourself. Also, I think we asked. Sorry, go. Yeah.
So I was going to say, Brandon, can I spoil a particular accessory? I'm thinking the Pristine Music Box, which is a base item that you can craft on or that you can get enhanced. Like this is an item base.
Right. Say yes. You will say yes. Hang on. Just Jedi mind tricks. Come on.
This is one of my favorites. This is one of my
Kevin
favorites.
will say no, but I'll say yes. All right. So if we can't and we get yelled at, we're going to throw you under the bus. All right. Go on. Do it.
So this is one of my favorites. This is an example of a build enabling trinket, right? So this is your projectiles that fork have an X% chance to fork again. So if you are already this is telling you already invest in fork. Otherwise, the base mod of this is not going to do anything for you. But you can roll as high as 14% on this. And so imagine you've got 14% chance for your forks to double up. That's going to give you crazy amounts of additional damage projection. But that is not something that is a unique item. That is something that is just the implicit that's found on your trinket slot, on one option that you've got on your trinket slot. If you're not interested in forking, you're not going to use this one. You're going to use something else.
Yes, forking hell is a very succinct way of putting that. Yeah, I think we were asked earlier before. I caught a glimpse of that. What did I see? It had to do with. I think someone asked if we had anything like energy shield in the game. Did I see that, or am I losing my mind here? It was further up.
There is the ward mechanic, which is going to be like superficially similar.
Yeah, so ward is essentially the defensive layer that we're going to be having, which works in a relatively similar vein to how ES does for the most part. So
and one of the systems we're still working on may provide adrenaline, which is still being worked on. This is definitely not guaranteed to happen, but we may end up with something akin to Path of Exile 2's Guard as well.
So another question I wanted to ask you, in terms of everything that you've worked on, like what has been your like favorite or like system we've worked on, mechanic or feature? I know this is a loaded question because some of the stuff is falling into spoiler territory. So I guess technically the question is directed at stuff you can speak about. Well, what is something like that you thought that this is pretty unique or it stands out compared to like what you've seen in other ARPGs?
Damage mitigation. Damage mitigation, definitely.
For me personally, like obviously I can't go into too much detail, but it has to do with the card system and in particular, both the playing cards and the tarot cards. It wasn't too long that we were having conversations on how to kind of balance them, but knowing of like the different hands, as well as how the tarot cards can work in there, there's a lot of shenanigans that could be afoot. So I'm very curious to see how many more like tarot cards we're going to end, how that particular system is going to evolve over time. Because right now we're kind of on the ground floor, and there is always the opportunity to expand this. Curious to see how that will play out overall. But I reckon out of all the systems, that's when Kevin described that system to me the first time, that was probably one of he showed like a very early kind of like concept art of the cards as well, and I thought, I wonder just how many ways you can take this system, like how much customizability and variability there's going to be. So having had a recent QA session where we were sort of ironing out the nuts and bolts, locking a few things in. Obviously, a lot of it is subject to change. That was probably the first time I saw the overall mechanic and realized just how much potential it actually has.
The card system is really cool. It's like the reason I didn't answer it is that I wasn't super involved in it. Like there was Lighty's original design, and we iterated a bit. Lighty and I iterated it a bit before it got to where it is now. But I don't feel like it's very much of my work has gone into that.
I was late to the party as well. Out of curiosity, you might be able to answer this, Hex. Who designed like the initial draft of the actual card system? Because how did that come to be? It makes sense given the Western scene. Oh, it's you and Brandon? No way.
Well, it's Kevin and Brandon. Okay.
I
was thinking it was Lighty for some reason.
Yeah, I gotta give you guys points for that one. I didn't realize it was something you two guys created. Very nice.
It's one of the most interesting ideas of just something that is not a traditionally equipped item, but that functions like one. Path of Exile 1 has, and 2 for that matter, have this with jewels.
Yeah.
There's something that's not a traditionally equipped item, but they function like one, and they really add a lot of customization to that game. They're not right for us. We're something quite different, but the card system, I think, will be that type of customization, but in a really transformative system.
Yeah, because it fits perfectly within like the Western setting, like cards in particular. By extension, like dice and coin as well. I'm not sure if that'll ever end up being something, but card system in particular, and because we're also hitting on the occult theme, tarot cards just seem like a very simple thing to mesh with that. So I'm going to be curious to see the types of combinations that are going to be made available. But yeah, I didn't realize it was Kevin and Brandon's like a initial idea. Yeah, the way I think Blaze put it is pretty much spot on. Like, kind of, I think so. I played D2 more recently. The Charms was, I believe it takes up inventory space, and they can roll in a plethora of ways. And provided you keep the charm on your person, you get that bonus. Playing cards in this sense go into their designated slots, and depending on the hand you compose, generally will trying to be very careful with my words here, I'm not spoiling too much, but it'll elicit an effect. So naturally, the rarer the hand, generally speaking, the more powerful the overall effect will be. The suits will also come into the equation, and then we also have the tarot cards, which have their own unique effects as well. So with those 5 slots available, curious to see what folks are going to come up with.
Except, sorry for straight flush enjoyers, you have been nerfed. That was you can blame me for that.
You heard it first. You heard it here first. Bonky, you mentioned other custom suits. My understanding is we're generally adhering to the standard suits that we have, right? We're not going full freaking Balatro in this, where we're just going to have random jokers going ting 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 ting, increasing a card multiplier or anything like that. It's going to be relatively.
Well, let's just stay quiet about the one exception that we've made to the traditional set, because I think that can be a big surprise for people that they'll really like.
I just realized which one you were talking about. I was present when that one had been put. Wait, Blaze, was it you who put that one forward? I'm trying to remember now. You were definitely in the conversation, I swear to God. It was when we were designing potential like masterworks and whatnot, and we were kind of like spitballing different ideas. I swear to God, you were in there. I'm not sure whether it was your.
That's doing a lot of the foundational balance. This specific exception to cards is like a complete and utter nightmare.
Yeah.
And I think that people who are very much into the power fantasy side of things, they're going to have a bit of fun playing around with this, and they are going to break things, and they are going to break things bad.
That's the one I'm most excited about. I'm just hoping it doesn't become the Dark Quest, Pee-wee's equivalent was. I remember one item that just got changed all the time was the writhing jar. There was a lot of shenanigans that were the result of that. So I'm hoping that this particular item is not going to elicit a similar thing where we'd have to keep bonking it over the head over and over. But that's gonna shenanigans shall be afoot. Let's go with that as the closing statement regarding that. Also, once again, pardon for the flashbacks. I'm just double checking if any other questions that I might have missed, but I think we are doing a pretty good job of keeping pace. I don't think we have anything like splody worms. We do have a very impressive roster of enemies. More are being added as time progresses. Trust me, you got no idea how much I would love to be more specific. But then this is the sort of stuff that we want players to discover themselves once they either get their hands on the demo or by extension when they play early access. I know sometimes you're like, that's not an answer, man. Like, I'm going full politician where I'm just yapping without answering the question. I'm trying not to. I'm trying to be as specific as I can within the confines that I find myself in. Well, the character have a thirst and hunger meter. We won't have it, to the best of my knowledge, you can back me up on this, Gog. I don't think we have anything to do with that. The only thing that there is a system, we do have posh flasks essentially, but I believe there's, I'm being careful not to say this, but there is one we're still working on, but I don't think it's been fleshed out yet. So we have potions, but there is one particular one that I think is being iterated upon, but I'm not sure if I should say it out loud. The older,
that one's not. I know the system you're talking about. I think we need to get that in before we really talk much about it. I think we need to get it into a position where we're internally happy with it.
Yeah.
Because right now we are not there. We like this system. We
Yeah.
think it's got a lot of potential, but it is. There are things that I can say, yeah, we're pretty happy with this, and say, yeah, this is something we can reveal. Whereas
Okay.
that system you are talking about is one that isn't. On the thirst and hunger meter, though, like one of the things that comes up a bit because of the type of because of the type of world we're in, there's a lot of survival horror elements that feel like they would fit well thematically, and I think Thirst and Hunger come into this. But because we're not making a survival horror game, those are things we're just abstracting away, generally speaking. So we don't want to have a situation where your character is becoming weaker over time because you're withering away or anything along those lines. It is an ARPG first and foremost, and survival horror games are great, but they are a different genre, and I think that taking elements of them ends up diluting both.
Yeah,
Whereas
because like
you
if
want
you
to
had
have
like you don't want to have the player go through like a desert region and then arbitrarily put in like a function to deal with like thirst and the heat. While thematically it might make sense, it just wouldn't make sense within an ARPG setting for the purely for the sake of like realism.
Yeah, and I think Diablo 2's stamina meter is a good example of that, where that's something that would be perfect in a survival horror game, but it's just really frustrating in Diablo 2.
Sunburn debuff. I mean, just with me and the sun are natural enemies for obvious reasons. But yeah, it makes sense not having. Yeah, we don't want to be adding mechanics that just end up being something else that the player has to, keep an eye on and manage throughout their journey. We want to create. We don't want it to be a free ride, but we also don't want to add unneeded friction, I guess is what I'm trying to say. Overall. But if you got guys any
Yeah,
other
that's the sort of
questions?
friction that is really good in the right genre, but when we're an ARPG, we're not the right genre for it.
Speaking of friction, though, I gotta say one thing I was glad to see. That's something which comes into the conversation almost every single time, specifically when it comes to the creation of mechanics. Obviously, I can't go into the specifics of the nature of certain mechanics, but if at any point it feels like the player is being delayed or they're having to unnecessary busy work, or if it has to do with getting from like point A to B, we just want the player to be able to smoothly just progress without any sort of like unnecessary rigmarole. So I'm glad to see that anytime we approach the development of a mechanic, that's one of the things that's the forefront. Although we're trying to be careful not to make it too easy, but generally the aim is that we don't want to create like just unnecessary busy work, I suppose. So, Mitchell, what about the weapons? I see that he's only shooting with revolvers. Will there be pump rifles or hatchets like tomahawks or knives? So, I believe we have a pretty decent roster of firearms. I mean, I take it we can, as long as we don't mention the specific Masterwork unique types, I guess we can tell the type of the weapons that we have. So,
Yeah, let's keep Masterwork stats for players to discover, but
yeah.
there's like there's a question I kind of would need to verify with Brandon and Kevin about what's been publicly announced so far. In terms of like, yeah, we have firearm. Well, obviously, you can see firearm use, but how much have we explained the flamethrower type use? Like, what exactly is going on? I might just check that with Kevin and Brandon, and then that would clarify.
Because like generally like weapon bases, yeah, as Wally beat me to it, we got things like revolvers, we got rifles, shotguns. So those types of weapons will be present.
And they'll all feel different to each other as well.
And go into great detail. Literally have a spreadsheet that kind of goes into the specifics, rate of fire, the whole 9 yards. A lot of numbers. A lot of numbers. The hex spreadsheet we can share the abilities are tied to occult powers that exist. Okay, so
Yeah, so the based on that, like there's one of the classes has capacity to use fire skills that are more occult themed.
So for clarification, the two classes that we have announced, that was the Gunslinger and the other one was the Padre. That one we already discussed. And while there is another one, I can't say nothing, mate. do apologize. I know I'm basically blue balling here, but got to keep stum about that. But yeah,
the third one needs a bit more work before we can announce it. We've got to lock down the identity to a point that, like, there's no point us talking about, hey, as of the middle of March, this is the vision we've got, because then what comes out might be something completely different, and then people who really like the vision we have now will be disappointed. People who dislike the vision we've got now might end up liking it more.
Yeah, I think that the approach we're going for right now is the first 2 classes we've announced. We want to make sure that those are like locked in, crisp. So from there we'll continue. Trust me, we brainstormed a whole host of other classes, and I'm sure Kevin's like, shh, silence, no more, because like the second we start talking about other classes, we're going to start like spending more time on those. We have plans. Lord knows we have ideas, but we also got to focus on the ones that are in the here and now and are a lot more concrete. Personally, I got a very strong bias for my boy, the Gunslinger, but who knows? Maybe the Padre is going to win me over. Until it's doors open on that one, so I'll see which one I have a greater affinity for. But I think because I saw the Gunslinger first, my mind's just instantly locked onto my boy. Besides, who don't like fanning the hammer? That's like the first thing that I saw. It's like that's my boy right there.
Yeah, the Gunslinger definitely was the one that interested me, just because there's so many cool things we can do with projectiles that aren't done in other games. Like, one thing that I think people might find interesting is our chaining system is very different, because we want to start it out. We want this vibe where your early access to chaining feels like it is not supernatural in nature. It feels like it's just you're an unbelievably good firearm user. And then later on, you start getting the ability to really become supernatural. And so we have chaining angle as a stat. So if you hit a monster that's at your 12 o'clock, so it's just due north of you, if your chaining angle is 60 degrees, then someone that's between 10 o'clock and 2 o'clock, one extra target will potentially be hit there if there is one. And then you can scale up the amount of chaining that you've got and get from the point where early on it's stuff that is just unbelievably skilled with a firearm to then really, really clearly occult-powered supernatural firearm use.
Cool. Yeah, we've got. I mean, you can see in the trailer as well. Yeah, I believe that's the chain effect. I think it's currently on loop at the moment. But you kind of get to see that firsthand. What about defenses? Traditional or something new? I think this one's definitely for you, God, because there's where numbers are involved.
Yeah, so, okay, let's start with defenses, how they're done in Diablo 1, right? So in Diablo 1, you have probabilistic evasion. So you build up your armor class, and then each point of armor class is 1% avoidance for physical attacks. And at the same time, you build up your resistances, and once they hit 75%, I think 75 was a cap in D1, then no further investment in resistances helps. So that's the baseline. That's the way that most RPGs have gone, very similar to that. They've had some sort of avoidance stat, and those avoidance stats have got more complicated. So Path of Exile 1 has evasion rating as its avoidance stat.
Oh boy.
Path of Exile 1 also has armor class, armor as a new stat that is not probabilistic, it's deterministic, and it's better against small hits. Then, however, you've got the core resistances that game's got. And at some point during the game, your character gets a nerf that is probably not conveyed very well in Path of Exile, but you go from 0 base to -30, then again to -60. But essentially, your goal is to get up to the cap of resistances and no further over, because your additional investment is wasted. We wanted to change that. We wanted to have a system where you could keep scaling resistances, where we could have a helmet giving you 137 curse resistance, and that's not enough. Not necessarily that's not enough, but that you want more. You would aspire to get, if you could replace that with something that was giving you 173 curse resistance, you would be happy to do so. And that's something that what we've done is created a system where resistances don't have a cap. You can get 650 of a resist. Each 100 damage you actually take also causes the amount of your resistance damage to be negated. So if you've got 650 curse resistance, a hit for 750 causes you to lose 100 life, and then 650 further damage bounces off your resistance. It's not probabilistic. It's just a flat damage mitigation. So that's our mitigation system that we're starting with. Criticals are more complicated than that, but criticals, that I think we'll find it's pretty intuitive once you play with it. The key thing here is that you don't have the same systems that you're familiar with, but we also tried to make this something that's both simple and also just doesn't have weird interactions with optimization.
And correct me if I'm wrong as well, Gog. The in terms of how we've designed things, we do have like a glossary as well, which is going to be available in game. So we want to minimize the instances where folks feel as though they have to tab out of the game and access like a wiki or some sort of like third-party site. We generally want the players to be able to find all the answers pretty much within the game. So by that extension, with like defenses and stuff and other elements of that, will those, I assume those be in the glossary and like spelled out for the player, so they know how all these work. I'm not sure if that's going to be, will that be as part of the glossary as well?
Yeah, these resistances, and we've had the question of how many defenses there are. There's physical resistance, curse resistance, fire resistance, and then there's the different but similar critical resistance. If you understand the main three, you'll understand critical resistance for free, except for one nuance, which is that criticals deal a normal damage plus the rest of the damage is in critical damage. So that's all of the resistances that we've got there. And yeah, this will be explained in the glossary. We've just got to get the perfect wording for it, because it's one of those things where you're using just a formula that's a little bit more complicated than what people are used to, even though I think the core concept is very grokkable. It's like every 100 life you lose, your resistance mitigates an amount of damage equal to the resistance. That's the core underlying concept, but we've just got to get the wording on that absolutely perfect so that people understand it.
My concern is that when I first learned how armor worked in PoE, way later than I should have, because it has it as, you know, physical damage reduction, and if it says something like 60%, my brain was like, well, I'm obviously mitigating 60% of like physical damage. But then I realized it, you know, depending on the scope of the hit, like it differs quite noticeably. So if I recall correctly, armor in PoE1 generally is better against smaller hits, but it doesn't fare as well against larger ones, I think, is how it works.
That is correct. And if you've got 45 times the size of the hit in armor, then that is the cap.
Jesus. I no wonder I'm getting bonked over the head. That explains a lot.
So to hit the armor cap on Uber Shaper's critical hits, I think you need just over 1 million armor. And then that's 90% mitigation on its own with no other sources. And that's the hardest physical hit, other than like meme ones.
Yeah, so my hope is that assuming we get the wording correct, I'm hoping that it's articulated to the player in such a way where there aren't those misunderstandings, because like you see the tooltip saying one thing and it's written in a very precise way, but then when you go into like PoE1's wiki and you look at the armor in general, you see like the equation. It's quite different. So the intent is that we want to make sure that it's very clear to the player, like what something is actually doing, rather than it potentially being misconstrued or misinterpreted.
If you've got 150 curse resist, it doesn't matter whether the hit is small or big, it's 60% mitigation.
Oh, and Bonk actually mentioned something that we covered not too long ago, which was, will there be a death recap? I believe we literally discussed this not too long ago. There were a few versions that we were going for, but generally there was a couple of ones that were proposed. If I recall correctly, we took a little bit of each one where we would, this is more of a numbers thing. So what did we settle on in the end? I know we wanted to avoid it being the last hit, because what we didn't want was you take like a big hit, and then the last thing that kills you is like you step on a Lego and take 1 damage and die, and you don't really learn what killed you. So I think you were present for when we had the final one, Gog, pretty sure.
Just trying to think, as I know that was one of the concerns that I raised when we were discussing it, was that you don't want it to give you actively misleading information. I just can't remember what we decided on with respect to the role mitigation played in it and
Yeah.
all of that. So there's a lot of complexities that aren't there, but we definitely want to have a death recap, and we are going to do one. I'm just not sure. It's probably something we'll have on day one, right? I'm
Because the one we were going for is we wanted to show the highest, like it would cover the highest instances of damage that you'd like receive recently. So because obviously if you're taking like tiny baby level damage, that's not really going to tell you much. So it was to articulate to the player like these are the successive hits that kind of chunked away at your health. This is the type of damage it was. This is where your resistance was at. The key thing here is nothing is worse. I mean, show of hands, play any ARPG and you said out loud, what the hell just killed me? We've all been there. And I remember talking to Lighty about it, and I asked him, is there a reason why games don't really have like a death recap? And apparently, yeah, it just is was the answer. I don't know about the complexities, but Lighty was feeling the vibe I got from him is that he's very confident that we can actually put in a system that can clearly articulate to the player these are the instances of damage that completely shredded your life. So this is how much damage you took. This is what your resistances were. So if you notice a hit that took like 2/3 and it's fire damage, you're like, well, obviously my fire resist is completely rubbish. So you would work towards, covering that particular flaw. But so the key thing is you want to be able to learn from the death to figure out what brought you from full health to Zippo, as opposed to thinking, well, my character died, what do? So we want to make sure that the players actually know what chunked them in the end.
Yeah, and so like with respect to fire resist, like that can be upgrading your gloves because gloves have an implicitly giving a lot of fire resistance, but it can also be changing your jewelry choices because you can invest into fire resistance that way as well.
Let's see here. What else have we got? One shot from off screen. So,
Yeah.
so go on.
I was just saying, Bonky's got an interesting question there about how damage scaling works. Is linear or exponential? And I feel like the vibe we're going for is that approximately 5 times over the campaign, your character's damage output doubles. And these will be roughly equally spread. That's for early access. So in that sense, it's exponential overall, and the way that we've done that is by targeting that by scaling base weapon damage accordingly.
Excuse me, vocal cords are struggling a little bit here. Normally games don't have a death recap because it can be hard to put in after the fact. Well, that's another benefit as well. So because we're still in the in the grand scheme of things in the earlier stages, we can set those things right off the bat. I know that some games they get memed on where they'll be like spaghetti code, but we're hoping that right off the rip, what we've put down foundationally is more or less rock solid. So the sooner we get these added in, it's not something we have to tack on later on, and then you don't want to have this. Not a programmer myself, but I've often heard the thing: you fix one thing, you break two others. So we want to make sure that a lot of these systems are there right off the rip. So that way, if we tack something on later on, you're going to inevitably have a domino effect. So yeah, you make a very valid point there, Ice. So because we're approaching this, this is one of the benefits of we can look up the plethora of ARPGs that have come out, look for things that they've done well, some things that they may have added later, and maybe would have been better if it was addressed early. So we have the power of hindsight right off the rip that we can do. How does skills from the legendary items work? Like you get level 30 of some skill in PoE. Is it going to be scaling if that is even a thing in the Dark Quest, or is it going to be a static value like Balefire and stuff? Skills work. So are you saying if there's an ability that is granted to you by virtue of having the weapon itself, so it has a skill baked into it? Is that what you're saying? Because I don't think if we have anything like that where if there's a piece of equipment and it grants you access to like level 5 something like
yeah, there are things that give you plus X levels to a particular skill, and they will work according to like if you don't have that skill on your class, our current plan is that you do get access to it. So if your build doesn't have a skill and you get an item that says +3 to XYZ skill, then you gain access. You go from level 0 to level 3. At level 0 you can't use it, but level 3 you can, and then that gives you a bit of flexibility to invest in that particular skill if you want.
Right.
But you can't invest your own points in unless something else is allowing you to do so. And that's something that I feel like this is a stat we're being pretty stingy with from memory. And it's more intended for utility than power, but there'll definitely be the odd case where it's powerful.
Right. If I want to buff a skill from other classes or something, I have I have the ability to get it in some cases. So basically, yeah, echoing what Gog had mentioned. So basically, if the way it would work is if an item actually gives you plus levels in a particular ability that isn't part of your repertoire, so to speak, by virtue of let's say having like +3, you get access to that particular skill at that level. Was that the correct way of putting it? I think.
Yeah, you go from level 0 to level 3.
Okay.
Level 0 can't use it to level 3 can use it.
Okay, yeah, I just wanted to make sure that I was on the same page and kind of echoing the same sentiment that Froxy had mentioned. Cool. Yeah, I believe D2 did a similar thing. I'm pretty sure. Yeah, because if
That's
you're
my
not,
recollection of D2 as well.
yeah,
but
because if you're not spec'd into the specific ability, if the item itself gives you the leveling, it gives you access to that particular skill. But I think the difference here is that it has to be something which is part of your class, like it's within your existing trees. For example, if you got something which is like level to barbarian skills, it wouldn't work on if you're playing like a summoner. In this case, because it's literally the item is barbarian specific.
Oh yeah, that's right. They were class locked items, weren't they?
Oh, excuse me, Jesus, just bumped my foot there.
This one might be one though that this might change. This is going to be something we've got to really play around with because I don't think we've done any implementation of +X to levels of X skill yet, and until you implement it, you got to make sure it works well.
Yeah, because the risk here is it's one of those things that on paper you might think it probably should work, but when in practice it could either be underwhelming or it could just be off the rails. So understandable. I'm sure that'll kind of go through back and forth. But hey, that's what we got QA for. That's why we have those meetings.
UI nightmare as well.
Yeah,
like that's the other thing that I'm thinking of with it. But yeah, as I said, let's say that this is our current vision, but it's not definitely going to happen that way.
Okay. Speaking of rails, is there going to be a rail shooter section? That's something I could say, but I'm being careful here. Rails could be a factor, but not in the way you're thinking. I'll put it that way.
I like that answer.
That's the best way. That's the best way I can say it without saying it outright.
One of the best, yeah. Just being cryptic is fun, like when you know things that other people shouldn't know.
Yeah, it's like an in joke.
Messing with people is fun.
Yeah, trust me. There's a lot of things I'd like to spell out, but I'm just being cautious because it's a mix of it's still being iterated upon. We don't want to spoil it, and I also need to learn to keep my big mouth shut. But that's the best.
And also, there's just the odd chance that one of these things, like we might have a situation where it's a choice between releasing on the planned date without this feature or releasing 3 weeks late with this feature, and we might decide that it's better to be on the planned date rather than delaying for it. It may not be worth the delay. It may be something to add later. So for that reason, we don't want to promise things that might end up not making the scope because the priority is just ends up being, oh yeah, we'll get a good game out and then we'll polish it later.
Frox, you mentioned, did you guys settle on an item slot that gets all of the busted shit, like how belt slots get all the busted stuff in PoE? Oh, like you basically alluding to like something akin to like a mage blood. So
there is definitely something. There is I feel like there's an item that Lighty really, really likes.
Yeah.
That is like that I feel is the most broken thing in the game.
Because like when we had the QA meetings when we were discussing like Masterworks and other items, we first started off with things that were like relatively grounded. Some things generally are like they're useful. They're far from like they're far from game breaking. They're solid, but there's definitely a couple of zingers out there. You're gonna look at that and think, really? So yes, there are some stuff that is definitely outliers. Are you talking about the item that moves you around in weird ways?
I'm not talking about the item that moves you around in weird ways. Let's just say that I'm talking about something that causes projectiles to behave in utterly ridiculous ways.
Listen, you have no idea how both specific and obfuscate he's being with this answer. I swear to God.
Let's say for those of you that have played the Super Nintendo game Hagane, which is famous as a bullet hell,
Yeah.
I feel like Laddie might have been inspired by Hagane.
Will this be a single player or multiplayer game? So, if I recall correctly, we're focusing on it being single player. It'll be self-founded. It'll be offline, but we haven't exactly closed the door entirely on multiplayer. It's something that might come into the equation like way further down the line. Or am I speaking out of turn here?
Yeah. Basically, the launch is going to be single player.
Yeah. So,
because like it's one of those things. I think that Kevin was saying that like once you start talking about multiplayer, you kind of triple a scope.
yeah. So we want to kind of keep the focus particular. But listen, any oil barons in chat, you want to throw a huge sack of coin our way? By all means, multiplayer's back on the menu, boys. But no, for now, jokes aside, we're kind of keeping it focused. And it's just simple.
Even then, not on launch day, because that would be something that like to get multiplayer would be a substantial delay, even if it was definitely funded.
Yeah. So kind of keeping things a lot more grounded in that regard. But like I said, it's not something we're just dismissing out of hand. But at the same time, we're tackling what's manageable. Are there destructible environment objects? Short answer, I believe so. Yes. Like we literally had a roster of like what was the term? Is interactables? I think we threw that as the terminology.
Yeah, and interactables includes chests as well. Like that's our internal thing. So it's not necessarily all of them are destructible, but they're all interactable in some way. And yeah, interaction can include violence.
Because we've, I believe, I've seen instances where not just with environments, we have it with like enemies where the limb damage and whatnot. So we even have things like that, which I will say, seeing the seeing the animations of those as they were coming to fruition, coming up across an enemy that's had a limb blown off, whether it be the leg or the arm, that that was an image, to be sure, rather evocative. But yeah, a lot of destructible things, both from enemies to objects, terrain wise as well, from the sounds of it. Yeah, as Blaze put it, spot on. Yeah, we want to go for a good single player experience rather than having a mid multiplayer. But yeah, let me tap out here for just a second. I think no, but
because I also think there are great multiplayer ARPGs as well already. Like it's sort of.
So hang on, I think I missed a question. What's the crafting system like? More PoE or more Last Epoch or more Torchlight or none of the above?
I'd say this is a none of the above, because like we're starting with it being more a like if you think of Path of Exile 2 0.1.0 has some elements of what we're aiming for, but the key thing is we had a philosophy discussion about where do we want the best items in the game to come from?
Yeah.
Do we want them to be things that you loot from monsters, or do we want them to be things that you craft from the ground up? And the philosophy we're starting with is that they primarily come from monsters. So crafting is more about polishing off an item. Like you get an item that's almost what you want, but not quite. Then crafting can improve it. It's a little bit more than what Path of Exile would be if the only crafting in the game was blacksmith's whetstones and armor scraps. But it's that sort of vibe where, okay, you've got a good item, but the whetstones can make it better. And so we have something that's loosely analogous to Exalted Orbs from Path of Exile 1 or 2. And we also have ones that are a little bit more targeted. But there's a few things that you'll find that'll be... There's a couple of genre staples that we do not consider sacred cows, that we're not going to necessarily keep exactly as you're familiar with. But most of the time, the best loot will come from killing hard monsters. And I think mostly you're going to have a couple of masterworks that make your build work, or uniques, as people are familiar with from other games. And then the rest of it will be rare items that provide raw stats. And those rare items will drop in an almost finished state. You'll slightly upgrade them.
And if I recall correctly, without going into too much spoiler territory, there will be certain currency items that are only going to be available by completing certain types of content, I guess is the best way to put this.
Yes. And the rarity question that's come up, we have Froxy is asking how exactly our item quality system works. So we have Masterwork is the rarest.
Yep.
We have Pristine, which I think you would say is loosely analogous to a rare item from Path of Exile and Diablo games, or Diablo excluding Diablo 1. We have then 2 tiers, like we have 3 tiers below Pristine, and they will have reduced effective modifiers, so they can still have random mods on them, but they will have reduced effect of them.
Yeah, like the lowest one I believe was Rusted, I think it was, or
Rusted, yeah.
Yeah, Rusted was the lowest tier.
Rusted one. I'm trying to think what the middle one is called off the top of my head.
What was it now? Oh, what was the other one?
But you would just regard these as lower quality rare items, and they'll spawn with fewer mods on them, as well.
Yeah, I mean, this has always been, I think, it's a subject that came actually up in my stream earlier today, where at one point I just held the alt button and all I saw was like an ocean of items. So it's just that thing where it's a balancing act. Where do you want very little loot to drop, but make it so the loot that has dropped is of greater significance, and something that the player will want to constantly mouse over and make sure and loot. Or do you want it to be where, in some regards, with how PoE has it, where a fairly large volume of the stuff that's dropping, your loot filter's probably going to hide. So, and you're only going to very, very rarely pick up something that which kind of stands out. So I think we're trying to avoid the instance where the floor is just completely coated in just faff. So I think it's just trying to find the sweet spot of that.
Yeah, and honestly, a bunch of these things will have to be... these are the things where our internal QA will probably fix up the big mistakes we make, because I will say that currently the loot drop tables are something that we haven't gone into big time detail on yet, and we actually have an internal placeholder because we want to see the feel of having it as the placeholder, where certain things are going to be quite scarce, certain things are going to be dropping in extreme abundance. We want to see what that feels like before designing something more complex.
Yeah, because we definitely want to get those things locked down. I'm sure a lot of this will still be subject to change. Spab, you mentioned, what about currency? Will it be a gold game or like? So I mean, we have, in terms of currency, we do have like cash. We got like actual dollars will be something that's in the game. But you mentioned, Spab, orbs or runes from like PoE Diablo 2. We got books.
These will be like, if you're talking about ways to modify an item with somewhat predictable, somewhat unpredictable results, akin to the Path of Exile 1 Exalted Orb, like you have a vague sense of what it's going to do, but there's a lot of variety in exactly how it will work. We're going to have things along those lines, but they're mostly like, You'll get a small amount of them from killing general monsters, but it will feel very stingy along those lines. So from regular monster kills, I guess if you're familiar with Path of Exile 1 Ruthless, it might feel along those lines for getting currency from direct drops from monsters. But item modification access is going to be more tied to specific mechanics.
Yeah, so the intent is for you to actually engage with the mechanics and have those mechanics be the ones that'll be generally more rewarding.
Yeah. One thing I guess I can mention here is that we're going to have something that's akin to an add a random prefix to an item, and one that's add a random suffix to an item. And there is a specific reason you might care more about this than you would in Path of Exile, but we won't talk about that. But those particular things come from the same mechanic as each other. And they're going to have a pretty high drop rate if you're doing the right mechanic. But if you're not doing the right mechanic, you're just not going to see them.
Yeah, so the intent is to have like certain things, behind those mechanics to incentivize players to pursue the mechanic. That's generally what we're going for. Bonky, you mentioned, what about pets that are mini version of bosses? I just pictured a very particular boss, but right now, actually. Sorry, I just pictured this particular individual miniaturized as he's just riding by. I don't think we have quite anything planned like that, to the best of my knowledge, of like having a little pets. Although the kiwis, listen, okay, listen. I'm obsessed with kiwis. I literally have an albino plushie here. Are they going to be in the game? Let's see. At some point, I'm going to pitch this. Right? Just maybe. I don't know. I can't. To the best of my knowledge, we don't. But would I like them? Sure. But no. As far as I'm aware, there's no kiwis.
Because I would always pitch the toucan, but again, I don't think I'm going to be able to get Kevin over the line on that.
Yeah, I mean, you, Kevin, you had kiwis, and you got me for life. All I'm saying, I will literally sign a pact with one of the dark deities, inscribed with my own blood, using the beak of this bad boy as the quill. How about that? Except, sorry. Let me see if there's any
in-game lighty pet. That is gold.
That'd be perfect. Oh man. Just make the toucan and kiwi like $100 MTX. Well, I think that'll be something which is a discussion for another time when it comes to like MTX and whatnot. Let me check what I might have missed here. You mentioned, please tell me you're avoiding on-death effects. Alright, so we're talking, old school volatile dead. Oh, I just reflected my own damage onto myself. Or, just anything that's the result of enemy dies, big boom, and then you follow suit. Trying to think, do we have anything like that?
Really nothing along these lines, right? Or am I wrong? Or is
I don't think so.
Is one of the mechanics something that might conceivably
those annoying chaos orbs that hound you. Oh, you mean the ones in using PoE as an example, the little chaos thing that follows you, speeds up, drops down on where you last stood still, and leaves the degen on the ground. And it's lightning mirage as well. But to the best of my knowledge, I believe we don't have anything like that off the top of my head. Pretty sure we don't.
Yeah, I can't name anything off the top of my head.
Yeah, no, we haven't got like spike monsters or porcupines. The question was, Hex, do we have any monsters with like on death effects? So we're talking, if we use PoE 1 as the point of reference, that would be like porcupines with the no, never. Okay, all right, just double check it. Just double check it. I appreciate it.
Right, so now we've got the internal game is going to be me trying to slide these in, and so when Kevin doesn't notice them, just to drive the boss a bit nuts.
Just randomly have just when you least expect it.
Yeah, just have like a massive dynamite explosion when you kill a particular boss.
He took my magic find. You're not gonna let that one slide.
I did.
Oh boy. I think you hurt his feelings with that one. But yeah, I think for now we're caught up on most of the questions. Unless anyone else has anything else to want to throw away. I had my own series of questions for Lighty, and there's something I could address myself, which we've generally exhausted for the time being. But if you have anything else you want to throw our way, we are at your disposal. Yeah, dude. As far as I'm convinced, Lighty is not one person. By this I mean there's one real Lighty, and he's the D&D equivalent of created like 3 simulacrums of himself because he's like everywhere. It's very disconcerting. Like the hours he does, that boy ain't right. He ain't human. Favorite memory from working on the game so far? For me, honestly, it was that moment where we finished fleshing out, for now I'll say, that particular mechanic, and I remember listing out the questions of how it would fit within the Dark West, and Lighty's response was, "That's a great question, Seth." And he just left me hanging. I was like, "Is there a follow up to this?" So taking those questions and then using what we already had available within the lore document to make things fit. Thankfully, like nothing was necessarily set in stone, but then getting that positive feedback from Lighty, where he's like, "Yep, that makes perfect sense, Seth. We'll add that in." That was very reassuring. Because generally, everyone that is on the project, my experience with them has just been a positive one. I think that largely stems from the fact that we've all played ARPGs to a ridiculous degree. Some of us are streamers, some of us are content creators, some of us have experience in the field. But generally, the vibe, like my own inferiority complex aside, because you've seen how much I put myself down. Everyone generally just still makes, in spite of my own ability to put myself down, I still feel welcome, and my ability to contribute still feels valid, despite me often feeling like what's the phrase, imposter syndrome. But no, it's been walls to walls, just a very, very positive experience all around. Seth, I asked Lighty this question. It was Print in the Air, I think, which was, did you guys settle on the way that damage over time works? Do we know this now?
Yeah. So I gave a cryptic answer of yes, but like, we should go into details on this. This is not some particular secret, right? So our current working plan, and this might change, is that damage over time will just resolve itself every 500 milliseconds on your character. So, for instance, if you suffer an initial hit of, using Path of Exile terminology, an initial hit of 1,000 fire damage that then inflicts 1,000 fire damage per second for 3 seconds, the way that would play out is that you'd take one initial hit of 1,000 damage, then you would take 6 follow-up 500-point fire hits. These would not be considered hits, these would be considered DOT ticks, and the 500 milliseconds number can potentially tweak in certain circumstances based on your character. But when you suffer dot, it's going to be in half-second increments. We are not going to be having an audible grunt every time you take damage over time. That is going to be horrible. Maybe if it's a very severe amount of damage over time, you might make that noise.
Sorry, I didn't realize I hadn't muted my mic there. I do apologize. I was going do apologize. But I hope that answers your question despite my incessant type. And I forgot to mute my mic like a total idiot. I was about to say, I was going to type this out, but it's kind of moot now because I put myself on the spot. It was regarding controller support. It is something which it'll be worked on further down the line. So it is something that we are looking to add, but not at this point in time. Trust me, I got a lot of things to put forward and contribute in that particular field. But right now, it's I believe movement is going to be WASD. So that we're kind of more focusing on getting that all nailed down, the keyboard and mouse wise, and then as we progress, yes, we'll look into greater detail as to how we can make controller gameplay work. Fortunately, there are plenty of ARPGs on the market that we can actually pull directly from, and each of them have done things in. They've taken things in their own direction, but there are also a lot of crossovers as well. So my hope is that we just take the best of what other games have done and essentially just pick what works best. How much dynamite do I need to crash my game? Well, as far as I'm aware, we don't have the means to give the player dynamite. Though dynamite is in the game.
There's sources of dynamite that are going to come up in game occasionally.
Yes.
That would be a question for Ricardo, I think. That would be. There's very much one where anything about crashing the game, is a question for him. He's sort of like, like I ran a few numbers questions by him at various points, like how much strain does it add to use 64-bit integer to track XP instead of 32-bit? How much strain does it cause to fire X number of projectiles and the like? He's pretty confident that that these numbers are much higher than I expected. Like the amount of damage that you can do. DOT cap is an interesting one. We have a functional cap, which is just if you can slay the monster in half a second, then that's a functional DOT cap.
Can one of the levels be fighting on a giant mecha spider like in the Wild Wild West movies? I'm gonna have to say nah. It's gonna be very tricky to fill that in. Listen, I'll give props to the order of being very advanced technologically, but everything's got a breaking point. What next? We're gonna add kaiju's to the game. Fully shut up. I'm on it. I got you covered, Chief. Well, there you go. If you have a giant mecha spider, then yeah, we'll just blame Bully for it. I'm gonna hold your feet to the fire on that one, buddy.
Yeah, there's some stuff that'd be really funny, but that would not be one of them.
It won't be showed on the UI the boss's health bar. That is a good question. So if we happen to, so will it be similar to how we have it in how we see it in PoE 1 and 2, where there's like a very clear, larger health bar? What are we settling on in the
Have
end?
we got anything at the moment? Like the internal test version, I think just has very little, right?
I'm pretty sure there's like a standard health bar that's over the enemy.
On top of the monster, but
Yeah.
it's like it's not. Yeah, basically the current UI that we have is very bare bones, and that's the sort of thing that we want to improve on.
Yeah, I mean this is something which is like constantly being iterated upon. We're trying. Okay, yeah, so yeah, we're trying to do it. The big one on top of the screen. Yeah, so because it's something which I feel like is, especially if you're like in an actual boss encounter, it's something that needs to be clearly articulated to the players so that they don't have to keep like awkwardly mousing over to have it flash up there. So you can spend more time like on positioning and making sure you stay in harm's way. Last thing you want to do is like, gee, I wonder how much health the boss is on, and then you end up getting smacked in the midst of that. Ninjas and pirates. It's going to be a tough sell in a Western setting there, pal. But I see that you're a dreamer, Spab. I like it. Please have an extensive in-game help wiki system. Don't use external sites or tools. Well, this is the reason why we're going to have the built-in glossary. Not to speak out of turn, but I believe the philosophy we're going for is we want the player should be able to basically find the answers and do everything within the game. We want to minimize the instances where the player has to tab out to find the answer, because that isn't fun for anybody. Like several times they'll be like, "Oh, go check out the." It could be for any game, go check out the wiki or download this separate bespoke tool that helps figure this out for you. So we want it all to be ideally internal within the game.
Yeah, factual questions. We want you to find. We want you to be able to find your answers within the game. Optimization and strategic questions, maybe not. That's something you might then liaise with other players on whatever website, but that's different to it.
Down the line, if there's ever an expansion, maybe we can get a wandering monk like Kane from Kung Fu. Monk. Interesting. Kung Fu? Like I said, we have there are other classes that folks have thrown around, but to not give Kev a heart attack where we're suddenly like, yeah, but we're being very careful not to have any additional classes. We got two that we are dedicating most of the time to and polishing, which right now is the Gunslinger and the Padre. There's another one presently in the works, but though that still needs to go through additional overview. Also, let me just, much like before, see if I've missed anything else. Quick refresh. Nope, actually keeping on top of these. Yeah, don't worry, Kev. I'm gonna throw you a random curveball. I think on average we tend to go for about 2 hours on this, so just setting people's expectations. So if they have any other burning questions, now's a good a time.
Well, should we talk more maybe about some of the items you might discover? Not the Masterworks, which we've decided to mostly keep secret, but what about some of the item bases? What do people think on that?
I mean, what are you willing to share? I guess is the question. Or how much can we?
Well, what I was thinking of doing, maybe let's just get the okay from Kevin on this, is just revealing like some of the different types of rings bases that you might find throughout the game.
Waiting for confirmation. He's thinking the gears are turning.
We haven't got into. We've worked these all out, mate. We've worked all of these out. The ring bases. I don't know about Masterworks. I haven't been that involved in the Masterworks. I've been involved in the. Oh, we haven't shared anything. Yeah. Okay. Cool. All right. Well, what you're going to find is that they're going to start simpler. So from level 8 onwards, or at least from monsters at level 8 onwards, you'll get access to what I term the basic double resist rings. So those of you that are Path of Exile 1 players, you will think of these as the 2 stone rings of this game. So I have the Pearl Ring, the Obsidian Ring, and the Diamond Ring, which will have 2 of the non-critical resistances. And then at 16, you'll pick up critical resistance as an additional option in there. So you'll get crit and fire, crit and curse, or crit and fizz. But then we start changing. So that's the basics. But then as you get further on, you'll be able to pick up things that might give you attack speed, cast speed, reload speed and life, crit chance and movement. And these replace some of those resistances. So if you want to specialize and make your character more clear speed oriented, a bit more of a glass cannon, you can change away from the rings that provide you 2 resistances that might solve a problem on your character's defenses, but then they can provide you with something else instead. And that's one of the key things we wanted to have there, is just a bit of flexibility in your gearing so that you can choose what you want to have. And I feel like most people at endgame are going to want the silver ring, which is crit chance and movement speed. It's nothing defensive about it at all. Well, I mean, movement speed's a defensive stat to some extent, but it's just something that's going to make you feel better when you are already defensively strong enough.
So following up, Spab asked a question where you mentioned anything about an endgame loop. So if being careful with my words here, we obviously, how to phrase this, like, but there are mechanics that we have got in place.
Organized, yeah.
Yeah.
We've got like, there's like, partly one of the things that I don't want to go into too much detail here, we've got a couple of systems that we feel are pretty solid, but there's also the glue that ties them together. If you're taking Path of Exile, we've got a couple of endgame systems, like you might say in-map ritual events are an endgame system in Path of Exile 1, but then they're held together by the glue of maps. And so maps are where you engage with rituals in Path of Exile 1. The part that we are still iterating the most actively on is the equivalent of mapping. So the glue that holds everything together. In that sense, we've got a couple of isolated systems that will provide endgame content, but the whole loop is not finalized yet.
Yeah, because like what we want to avoid, I think the intent is like for early access, there's still a little ways away, that we want to have I think Lighty might have answered this on one of the not necessarily Q&As, but on one of the podcasts where he mentioned, you threw out numbers that you for early access wanting something in the ballpark of 40% of like the campaign to be available approximately, and then have something akin to like an end game where folks can continue to stretch their legs and express like leveling up and growing stronger. And we do have systems intended to help the players like facilitate that progression, so they don't suddenly like, oh, I finished the campaign, I have no more room, like there's nothing to fight, there's nothing to do. So we wanted to make sure there's at least something that the players have available where they can continue to level and continue to get better gear and just continue to increase in power.
Yeah, and that's why we've got some completely ridiculous stuff in the game.
But once again, Sam, I'm not trying to be obtuse about this. I would like to be a bit more specific, but yeah, got to stay within the confines of. I got to speak in certain vagaries now and again. But your question was like, is there an end game? Yes and no, but mostly yes. But as we get closer to early access, I'm sure a lot more of those things are going to get fleshed out and ironed out. Will there be leveling gear? So
I can answer this one. Yeah. This is something I had a bit of input on. So, who's played Path of Exile 1 a lot and has had that disappointing moment where you've got an item, a rare item has dropped that you look at and you're like, oh my god, if that was instead of being a low level base, if that was like a Twilight Regalia, I'd be stoked with it.
Yeah. Because
you've got the perfect combination of good mods, but it's on a low level item, right? That's something that comes up a lot in Path of Exile 1. So I wanted to make it so that when a Silken Wrap drops at endgame, that's a low-level energy shield base, I wanted to make it so that it's not as disappointing a drop as it is in Path of Exile 1. And one of the systems that we've done here is if you get an item drop that is a substantially out-leveled base, and this only applies for things where there's a clear tiering system on the bases. So this applies to armor pieces, but not to jewelry. Then the minimum level to equip that item is reduced. So the Path of Exile equivalent would be what item base is Cloak of Flame on in Path of Exile 1? I'm trying to think. It's
Sage Robe, I think it was, something like that. I think Cloak.
Yeah, and it's a level 18 base in any case.
Yeah.
If you were to get a level 18 base like the Sage Robe to drop when you're killing a level 45 monster, instead of a minimum level 18, it'd be a minimum level of 13. And that's something that means that if you want leveling gear, you're going to find leveling gear on your first run through for your next character, just by virtue of getting these things that, as long as it's 2 bases out leveled, no, was it 2 bases out leveled? It's something like 2 bases out leveled. You won't see them very often, but when you do, they'll have an unusually low minimum level. Scholar's Robe is what Bonky has mentioned there.
Yeah, I think so.
And so that's something that's a way to get leveling gear that is not Masterpiece. It's not Masterworks, like the way that in Path of Exile 1, it's mostly Masterworks. 1 is something a bit different. And yeah, so that's the sort of role it will play. And people have different leveling gear to each other. It's not going to be, everyone uses 6,000 ribbons if they can afford it.
I'll do one final Passover since we're kind of coming to bottom of the 9th here. Yeah, I think we've answered the bulk of the questions that we had in reserve. So with that, folks, if it's all right with y'all, as riveting as this conversation has been, I think we're going to draw this particular QA session to a close. I hope I did well for the most part. Kind of winged it. Very, very big thank you to Sir Gog for basically hard carrying this and my carcass across the finish line, and for everyone else's patience and helping me set this all up. So we're going to bring this to a close. I believe this will be uploaded to the YouTube channel, and I think all the links will be available. Goes without saying, by all means, go on to Steam and look up the Dark West. For the love of God, wishlist the game if you can. And as always, we got the community Discord as well. And if you guys want to be kept apprised, you're more than welcome to hop in my stream, or pretty much wherever, even Woolies or Ableist and whatnot. And feel free to ask any questions. We're pretty much I'm available all day, every day for the most part. But we're gonna bring this stream to a close now. I want to thank everyone who took their time to hang out, ask questions, and just joined in general. But yeah, I'm gonna bring this to a close. So I'm gonna bid you all farewell, and hopefully we'll see you on the frontier. But yeah, take it easy, guys.